The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told Senator John Kennedy, "You're just an old white man who doesn't understand the future." On live CNN, she made the catastrophic mistake every overconfident socialist makes. She forgot she was insulting a Rhodes Scholar who'd spent a week preparing to ask her basic economics questions that a bartender-turned-congresswoman with a $174,000 salary and designer wardrobe couldn't answer. CNN had organized the Great Debate. Green New Deal, future or fantasy? It was their attempt to give progressive policies a prime-time platform. They hoped to make Republicans look backwards and out of touch. They'd invited Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as the champion of bold progressive change. She was the young face of democratic socialism. She was the congresswoman who'd become a social media superstar with 13 million Twitter followers and viral videos that dominated political discourse. She was the future, they told viewers. She was the voice of a generation demanding action on climate change and economic justice. They'd invited Senator John Kennedy to represent the opposition. They expected him to be the perfect foil, an older Southern Republican who would, they assumed, bumble through talking points and make AOC look brilliant by comparison. CNN's producers had briefed their moderator to give AOC plenty of time to explain her vision. They wanted to let her passion shine through. They aimed to create viral moments that would trend on social media. What they didn't know, what they hadn't bothered to research, because they'd been blinded by stereotypes about Southern Republicans, was that John Kennedy held a bachelor's degree with first-class honors from Vanderbilt University. He had a Juris Doctor from the University of Virginia School of Law, where he was an editor of the Virginia Law Review. He had a Bachelor of Civil Law degree from Magdalen College, Oxford University, where he'd studied as a Rhodes Scholar under some of the finest legal and economic minds in the world. Behind the aw-shucks Louisiana drawl and the folksy metaphors about his mama and fishing and common sense was one of the sharpest legal and analytical minds in the United States Congress. When Kennedy said, "I'm just a simple country lawyer," he was doing exactly what great trial attorneys do, setting a trap by lowering expectations before destroying opponents with superior preparation and intellectual firepower. Kennedy had spent a full week preparing for this debate with the same intensity he'd once prepared for oral arguments at Oxford. He'd reviewed every AOC interview going back to her first congressional campaign. He'd reviewed every speech she'd given on the House floor. He'd reviewed every tweet she'd sent about economic policy. He'd analyzed the Green New Deal line by line. He'd consulted with economists about cost estimates. He'd calculated per household expenses. He'd documented every factual error and logical contradiction in her proposal. He'd compiled photos of her luxury lifestyle, the Met Gala, the expensive apartment, the designer shoes. He'd organized them for maximum impact. He'd cataloged her policy failures, particularly the Amazon HQ2 disaster, with specific numbers and timeline documentation. He'd even prepared that oversized calculator as a visual prop, knowing it would get laughs while making his mathematical points more memorable. Most importantly, Kennedy had structured his entire approach around a simple strategy. Ask questions so basic that someone with an economics degree from Boston University should be able to answer them easily. Make the questions simple enough that the audience could understand why the answers mattered. When she couldn't answer or got the answers wrong, let that speak for itself. No need for personal attacks. No need for complicated arguments. Just simple questions, undeniable facts, and the devastating contrast between her credentials and her actual knowledge. What happened in the next 90 minutes would reduce a social media superstar to a stammering mess who couldn't explain where $93 trillion comes from. She couldn't defend her own economics degree. She couldn't reconcile her luxury lifestyle with her socialist rhetoric. If you've ever wanted to see what happens when a Rhodes Scholar uses kindergarten-level math to destroy someone who thinks economics is whatever sounds good on Instagram, this is it. Wait until Kennedy pulls out her luxury apartment photos at minute 34. She goes completely silent. The CNN studio in Atlanta was set up for maximum drama. 2 chairs angled toward each other on a stage, a moderator's desk between them, massive screens positioned to display evidence, and an audience of 400 people carefully selected to represent diverse political viewpoints. The crowd was roughly split. Young progressives wearing Green New Deal shirts and Democratic Socialist pins on one side, older conservatives in Don't Tread on Me gear on the other, with a section of genuinely undecided moderates in the middle. The energy in the room was electric. This wasn't just a policy debate. It was a generational clash. It was a battle between democratic socialism and traditional American capitalism. It was between Instagram politics and legislative experience. It was between viral sound bites and substantive governance. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez arrived first to thunderous applause from her supporters. She wore an immaculate cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than most Americans' monthly rent. Her hair and makeup were professionally done. She looked every inch the social media star she'd become. She waved to the cameras with practiced influencer precision. She smiled that bright smile that had launched 1,000 viral videos. She settled into her chair with the confidence of someone who'd never been seriously challenged on live television by an opponent who actually knew economics. Senator John Kennedy walked out 2 minutes later to equally loud applause from his section and polite acknowledgement from others. At 72 years old, with his white hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain, and light blue suit that looked like it came from a regional department store, he appeared exactly as CNN had hoped, the perfect stereotype of an out-of-touch older Republican. He waved in a grandfatherly way. He nodded at both sections of the audience. He settled into his chair with a warm smile. The moderator, Jake Tapper, began his introduction about the importance of discussing America's economic and environmental future. AOC looked eager, ready to launch into her prepared talking points. Kennedy looked relaxed, almost amused, like someone who knew a very good joke that nobody else had heard yet. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez," Jake began, "let's start with you. Why do you believe the Green New Deal represents the future America needs?" AOC launched immediately into her well-rehearsed speech. "Thank you, Jake. The Green New Deal is about recognizing that we face an existential crisis. Climate change isn't some distant threat. It's happening now. And we need bold, transformative action, not incremental changes, but a complete reimagining of our economy that creates millions of jobs while saving our planet." She turned to face Kennedy, her voice becoming more confrontational. "Senator Kennedy represents the old guard, the backwards thinking that got us into this crisis. People who prioritize corporate profits over human survival, who can't imagine a different future because they're stuck in the past." The progressive section applauded enthusiastically. Kennedy smiled and adjusted his glasses. When he spoke, his Louisiana drawl was thick as molasses. "Well now, Congresswoman, that's quite a characterization. I appreciate your passion. I truly do." He paused, the smile widening. "But I'm just a simple country lawyer from Louisiana, and I have a few questions that might help us understand your plan a little better, if that's all right with you. A Rhodes Scholar playing dumb is like a shark wearing floaties." Jake turned to Kennedy. "Senator, what are your concerns about the Green New Deal?" "Oh, I don't know if concerns is the right word," Kennedy said, pulling out a comically oversized calculator from under his chair and setting it on his lap. The audience laughed. I'm more curious about some of the numbers. See, I like numbers. They're honest. They don't care about your politics or your Twitter followers. They just are what they are. AOC looked slightly confused by the calculator prop, but maintained her confident expression. Now, Congresswoman, Kennedy continued, still in that folksy tone, you went to Boston University, got yourself a degree in economics. That's mighty impressive. I'm sure your parents are very proud. That school costs about $60,000 a year now, doesn't it? So figure $250,000 or so for your education. I worked hard for my degree, AOC began. Oh, I'm sure you did. No doubt about it, Kennedy smiled warmly. So with all that economics education, can you help me understand something? I saw a video of you talking about unemployment, and you said, now let me make sure I get this right. You said unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. Do you remember saying that? AOC's expression tightened slightly. That was taken out of context. Ma'am, I'm going to show the whole clip, full context. Is that all right? He nodded to the production booth, and video appeared on the screens. There was AOC in an interview saying earnestly, unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. People are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely afford to live. The clip ended. Kennedy looked at the audience with exaggerated confusion. Now, I'm just a country boy, but that doesn't sound right to me. If I have 2 jobs, am I counted twice when they calculate unemployment? He looked at different sections of the audience. Folks, help me out here. If someone has 2 jobs, are they counted as 2 employed people or 1 employed person with 2 jobs? The audience shouted back, 1! Kennedy nodded. That's what I thought. See, unemployment is the percentage of people who don't have jobs. If you have 2 jobs, you're counted once, as employed, not twice. It's basic statistics. He turned to AOC, still smiling pleasantly. So when you said unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs, that was wrong, wasn't it? AOC shifted uncomfortably. The broader point I was making, the broader point doesn't matter much if the basic math is wrong, ma'am. See, you have an economics degree from a fancy school, but you don't understand how unemployment is calculated. And that worries me a little bit when you're proposing to remake the entire American economy. The conservative section applauded. The progressive section looked uncomfortable. Kennedy wasn't done. Let's talk about Amazon. Do you remember Amazon? AOC's jaw set. She knew where this was going. Amazon wanted to put their second headquarters in New York, your district. Would have brought 25,000 jobs to your constituents. Good jobs, high-paying tech jobs, the kind of jobs people dream about. He pulled out printed documents. The deal included $3 billion in tax incentives over 10 years. But Amazon was going to generate $27 billion in revenue for New York over that same period. That's $27 billion minus $3 billion in incentives, which my calculator here tells me equals $24 billion for New York. He tapped the giant calculator for comic effect. But you opposed it, fought against it, and Amazon pulled out. Those 25,000 jobs, gone. That $27 billion in revenue, gone. New York got 0. Nothing. Zilch. Kennedy looked at the audience. And you know what Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said? She said those tax breaks, that $3 billion, could be spent elsewhere. He paused for effect. Ma'am, tax breaks aren't money you spend. They're money you don't collect. Without Amazon, New York doesn't collect any money from Amazon. You can't spend money you never had. He shook his head in exaggerated disbelief. You turned $27 billion in revenue into zero, and you called it a victory. Now, I'm just a simple man, but where I come from, turning $27 billion into zero isn't a victory. It's a catastrophe. AOC tried to respond. Those jobs would have been exploitative. Exploitative? Kennedy's eyebrows shot up. They were going to pay an average of $150,000 a year, ma'am. I think most folks would like to be exploited at $150,000 a year. The audience laughed, even some in the progressive section. Kennedy sat back, still smiling his grandfatherly smile. See, this is what worries me. You have an economics degree, but you don't understand unemployment statistics. You don't understand tax incentives versus government spending. You cost your district 25,000 jobs because you didn't understand basic economics. He looked directly at her. And now you want to remake the entire American economy with a $93 trillion plan. Should we be worried? I think maybe we should. She has an economics degree but thinks people with 2 jobs count twice. Comment bartender if you see the problem. Jake Tapper tried to move the discussion forward. Congresswoman, let's talk about the specifics of the Green New Deal. Yes, let's, Kennedy interrupted enthusiastically, hefting his giant calculator. I've been looking forward to this part. Nothing says, I did my homework, like props that make your opponent nervous. AOC launched into her explanation. The Green New Deal will create millions of jobs by transforming our energy infrastructure, retrofitting buildings, investing in public transportation. How much will it cost? Kennedy interrupted gently. The investment will pay for itself through, how much, ma'am? Total cost. The estimates vary depending on $93 trillion, Kennedy said flatly. That's the most credible estimate from multiple economic studies. $93 trillion over 10 years. Is that number in the ballpark? AOC bristled. That's a right-wing talking point. Ma'am, it's from economic analyses done by research institutions, not right-wing blogs. Actual economists calculated what your plan would cost, and they came up with $93 trillion. He started tapping on his giant calculator with exaggerated concentration. Now, let me work this out. $93 trillion divided by, let's see, 128 million households in America. He tapped more buttons, squinted at the display. That comes out to $726,162 per household. He looked up at the audience. Folks, can you afford $726,000? Because that's what your share of this plan would be. The audience erupted. No! Shouted from all sections. Me neither, Kennedy agreed cheerfully. And I'm a United States Senator. If I can't afford it, how can regular families afford it? He turned back to AOC. So here's my question, ma'am. How do we pay for $93 trillion? AOC took a breath. The same way we paid for World War II and the New Deal. Kennedy held up his hand. Stop right there. World War II cost about $4 trillion in today's dollars. Your plan costs $93 trillion. That's 23 times more expensive than defeating Hitler and Imperial Japan combined. He let that sink in. So the comparison doesn't really work. Try again. How do we pay for $93 trillion? Through progressive taxation, closing corporate loopholes. Specific numbers, please, Kennedy pressed. Let me help you. If we taxed every billionaire in America at 100%, took all their money, we'd get about $5 trillion. That leaves $88 trillion. Where does that come from? AOC fumbled. We would need to restructure. If we taxed everyone making over $100,000 a year at 100%, took every penny they make, we still couldn't pay for it. We'd need to tax the middle class into poverty. Is that your plan? That's not. Then what is the plan? You wrote this proposal. You champion it. You say it's essential for our survival. So tell us, how do we pay for it? Silence. AOC genuinely couldn't answer. Kennedy pulled out printed pages. Your office published a FAQ about the Green New Deal. Then you deleted it. Do you remember why? It was a draft document. It said you wanted to provide economic security for all who are unable or unwilling to work. Unwilling. He showed the deleted FAQ on the screens, highlighted sections glowing. You wanted to pay people who didn't want to work. How does that help the economy? The audience was laughing now. Even some AOC supporters looked shocked. And it mentioned, I'm not making this up, it worried about farting cows. Actual quote, we set a goal to get to net zero rather than zero emissions in 10 years because we aren't sure that we'll be able to fully get rid of farting cows. The laughter was deafening. And you wanted to build out high-speed rail at a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. You wanted to eliminate airplanes. Kennedy looked at the audience. How do we get to Hawaii? Swim really fast? Train across the ocean? He turned back to AOC, his tone becoming more serious under the folksy delivery. You deleted this FAQ because people started asking basic questions you couldn't answer. Like, how much does this cost? Where does the money come from? What happens to airline workers? What about the million industries that depend on air travel? He tapped his calculator. 700 per household. Elimination of air travel. Economic security for people unwilling to work. Government control of energy, transportation, housing, and basically the entire economy. Kennedy looked directly at her. Ma'am, I'm just a simple country lawyer, but I know a bad deal when I see one. And this is the worst deal in the history of deals. It costs $93 trillion you can't fund, destroys industries that employ millions, and hands total control to the government. He paused. That's not a new deal. That's a raw deal for every American family. $726,000 per household. Can't explain funding. Deleted FAQ. Share if you smell the BS. AOC tried to regain ground. We need to tax the rich to pay for... Speaking of rich people, Kennedy interrupted with a mischievous smile, let's talk about you. He pulled out a folder of photographs. She walked right into it like a moth to a very expensive flame. Kennedy displayed a photo on the screens, AOC in her white Tax the Rich dress at the Met Gala, posing on the red carpet surrounded by celebrities. This is you at the Met Gala. Beautiful dress. Very striking message. Tax the rich, in big red letters. He paused, looking at the photo. Ticket price to attend the Met Gala, $35,000. The audience gasped. Now, I'm just a country boy, but $35,000 seems like a lot of money for one party. That's more than half of what the median American family makes in a year. He turned to the audience. How many of y'all have ever been to a $35,000 party? Silence. No hands. Me neither. Most expensive party I ever went to was my daughter's wedding, and that didn't cost nearly that much. He turned back to AOC, still smiling. So you wore a Tax the Rich dress to a party that costs more than most Americans make. Do you see the irony there? AOC tried to explain. I was invited as a representative. You were invited because you're famous, ma'am. Let's be honest. And you went to a $35,000 party while regular people can't afford their rent. Kennedy pulled out more photos. This is your apartment building, Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. Very nice. Luxury amenities, gym, rooftop pool, concierge service. He showed photos of the upscale building. Monthly rent, $2,700. That's $3,400 a year just for rent. He looked at the audience. That's more than many families make in total income. Just her rent. More photos appeared. Designer shoes. These are Manolo Blahnik shoes. You wore them to a photo op about income inequality. They cost $580 for one pair of shoes. Kennedy pulled out his wallet dramatically. I wear boots from Walmart. Cost me $39. They work just fine. Keep my feet dry. Help me walk. What do $580 shoes do that my $39 boots don't? The audience was laughing and applauding. And you own a Tesla. Beautiful car. Very nice. Costs about $50,000. He shook his head. While you tell working families they need to sacrifice, while you attack fossil fuels, while you preach about equality. Kennedy walked through it systematically. Met Gala, $35,000 ticket. Luxury apartment, $2,700 a month. Designer shoes, $580 a pair. Tesla, $50,000. Your salary, $24,000 a year. He paused. And you complained that your salary isn't enough. You said it's hard to live on $174,000 a year. He turned to the audience. The median household income in America is $70,000. She makes 2.5 times that and says it's not enough. The audience booed loudly. Kennedy held up his hands. Now look, I'm not saying you shouldn't make a good living. Congress people work hard, I understand that. But you can't preach about equality while living in luxury. You can't wear tax the rich to parties that cost more than people make. You can't attack capitalism while enjoying its benefits. He looked directly at her. See, I'm honest, I'm comfortable, not rich like some folks, but I'm doing all right. I own that. I do not pretend otherwise. His voice became firmer. But you live like the 1% while preaching about the 99%. You enjoy luxury while telling others to sacrifice. You're a champagne socialist, ma'am. And where I come from, we have a word for that. He paused for perfect timing. Hypocrite, with very expensive shoes. $35K party. $580 shoes, luxury life. Preaches socialism. Comment fraud if you see it. Jake Tapper tried to moderate. Let's move to questions about representation. Oh yes, Kennedy interrupted. Let's talk about representation. Specifically, who you actually represent. AOC began. As someone from the Bronx who knows the struggle of working families. Hold on there, Kennedy said gently. Let's talk about where you're actually from. He displayed a map on the screens. In reality, the Bronx is about 10 miles from Westchester. In every way that matters, about 1 million miles. Kennedy pointed at the map. This is the Bronx. Median household income, $40,000. Poverty rate, 25%. Working class neighborhood, real struggle. He moved his pointer. And this is Yorktown Heights, Westchester County, where you actually grew up. Photos of Yorktown Heights appeared. Beautiful suburban homes, tree-lined streets, well-manicured lawns, excellent schools. Median household income in Yorktown Heights, $96,000. Median home value, $450,000. Top-rated public schools, one of the wealthiest counties in America. He looked at AOC. You say you're from the Bronx, but you grew up here, in wealthy Westchester. Wait, AOC tried to explain. My family moved when I was 5. So you grew up in a wealthy suburb, not the struggling Bronx, you claim. Kennedy pulled out more documents. Your daddy was an architect. Good profession. Made good money. Your mother worked in real estate. Also good money. He showed photos of a nice suburban home. This is where you grew up. Not a struggling urban environment, a comfortable suburban home in one of the wealthiest areas in America. More photos appeared. Boston University. You went to Boston University. Costs about $60,000 a year. Now figure $250,000 for your degree. Most working-class families can't afford that, but yours could. Kennedy's tone became more pointed. You bartended for a while after college. Lots of people do that, finding yourself, figuring out your path. That's fine, but you act like you were barely surviving. He shook his head. You had a degree from an expensive university. You chose to bartend. That's not struggle. That's a privileged person taking time to find themselves. He displayed a comparison on screen. The story AOC tells, from the Bronx, working-class family, struggled to make ends meet, bartender fighting to survive. The reality? From wealthy Westchester, professional parents, $250,000 education, comfortable upbringing. Kennedy looked at the audience. She presents herself as this working-class girl who pulled herself up from nothing. But it's not true. She grew up with advantages most Americans never get. He turned to AOC. Why lie about it? Why pretend to be something you're not? AOC tried to respond. I'm proud of my background. Then be honest about it. You're from Westchester, not the Bronx. Your family was comfortable, not struggling. You went to an expensive school, not community college. Kennedy's voice rose slightly, the southern drawl carrying an edge. You manufactured a working-class narrative because it plays well politically. Girl from the Bronx makes good. It's good branding, good for Instagram, good for fundraising. He paused. But it's not true. And lying about where you're from, lying about your background, that's insulting to people who actually struggled. He gestured to the audience. There are people in this room who grew up truly poor, who worked 3 jobs just to eat, who couldn't dream of going to college, and you pretend you were one of them when you weren't. His final line was delivered with quiet intensity. You're not representing working people, ma'am. You're pretending to be them. And that's worse than just being rich. At least rich people who admit it are honest. Grew up wealthy. Went to $60K school. Fake's Bronx story. Share if you're tired of the lies. Kennedy flipped to a new section of his materials. Let's talk about your grandmother in Puerto Rico. AOC's expression changed immediately. She knew this wouldn't be good. Using family for political points, then abandoning them. Even socialists should have limits. After Hurricane Maria, you posted about your grandmother's home. Posted pictures of the damage. Very sad situation. Hurricane damage is terrible. He showed her tweets on the screens. AOC posting about her grandmother's damaged home, using it to attack the federal response and President Trump. You made it very political. Blamed Trump. Blamed America. Used your grandmother's suffering to score points. He paused. Then something interesting happened. Kennedy pulled out new documents. Conservative commentator Matt Walsh saw your posts, and he did something. He organized a fundraiser to help your grandmother, to actually fix her home. Photos of the GoFundMe campaign appeared on screen. People donated real money, from real people who wanted to help an elderly woman in need. And you know how much they raised? The final total appeared, $104,153, over $104,000 for your grandmother. The audience murmured in appreciation. And you know what you did? Kennedy paused for maximum effect. You said no. Your office rejected the money, refused to let your grandmother receive it. The audience gasped, then booed. Why? Because it came from conservatives. Because accepting help from people you disagree with would ruin your narrative. He pulled out the official statement from AOC's office declining the funds. Your office said it was a cynical stunt, But ma'am, it was $104,000 real money for your real grandmother who you said was suffering. Kennedy's voice became harder. So let me ask you directly. Did your grandmother's home get repaired? AOC hesitated. I'm not certain of the current status. You don't know? That's your grandmother. I don't have direct oversight of... Did the money you raised off her suffering help her, or did it go into general funds? Silence. Kennedy shook his head slowly. Let me tell you something, ma'am. I'm from Louisiana. We take care of family. When someone's in need, you help them. You don't care about politics. You don't care who's offering the help. He pointed at the fundraiser total on the screen, $104,000, from people you've probably called racist, from conservatives you've attacked. They wanted to help your grandmother, and you said no. His voice dropped to a disappointed rumble. You used your grandmother's suffering to attack Trump, to make political points, to go viral on social media. But when people tried to actually help her, when real assistance was offered, you rejected it. He looked directly at her. Because your politics were more important than her welfare. Your brand was more important than her home. Your social media narrative was more important than your own grandmother. The judgment in his voice was palpable. Where I come from, family comes first, always. Before politics, before social media, before everything. He paused. But for you, Instagram likes come first. Trending on Twitter comes first. Your political brand comes first. Kennedy's final line was delivered with quiet disgust. That's not just hypocritical, ma'am. That's heartless. Rejected 104K for grandma for political reasons. Comment heartless if this disgusts you. Jake Tapper, looking somewhat shell-shocked, tried one more time to moderate. Congresswoman, you've cited your work in Congress. Let's review that work. Kennedy said, pulling out a notably thin folder. He held it up for the audience to see. This is my research on Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's legislative accomplishments. He opened the folder dramatically. One single sheet of paper inside. A Rhodes Scholar with an empty folder. That's intentional comedy. In 3 years in Congress, let me count your major legislative achievements that became law. He pretended to count carefully. 0. Is that right? AOC tried to interrupt. I've introduced important legislation. Introduced, not passed. There's a big difference, ma'am. Anyone can introduce bills. Actually getting them passed, that takes work. Kennedy pulled out a printed list. The Green New Deal, introduced with great fanfare. Failed in the Senate 0 to 57. Not even Democrats voted for it. He checked it off. Your legislative proposals, introduced, not passed. Introduced, not passed. Introduced, not passed. He looked up. What have you actually accomplished besides Twitter? AOC tried to list initiatives. Kennedy cut through each one. Not funded, not passed, blocked in committee, rejected by leadership, went nowhere. Kennedy sat down the paper. You have 13 million Twitter followers. Very impressive. You're great at Instagram, at TikTok, at going viral. He paused. But what have you done for your actual constituents? What jobs have you created? What problems have you solved? He pulled out statistics. Amazon, you chased away 25,000 jobs. That's negative job creation. Green New Deal. 0 votes in the Senate. Major legislation. Nothing passed. Committee leadership. None. Policy victories. Can't find any. Kennedy looked at the audience. Social media followers don't fix roads. Instagram likes don't create jobs. Twitter trends don't improve schools. He turned to AOC. You're an influencer who got elected, and I'm sure you're very good at social media. But being a congresswoman isn't about going viral. It's about governance, results, actually helping people. Kennedy pulled out his own record, printed legislation he'd passed, projects funded in Louisiana, actual results. I've been in the Senate 6 years. I've passed legislation, secured funding for infrastructure, helped Louisiana businesses, brought jobs home, fixed problems. He held up his much thicker folder. That's what governing looks like. Not retweets, not Instagram stories, actual work. He looked directly at AOC. You're all style and no substance, all brand and no results, all social media and no actual governance. His final assessment was devastating. You're not a legislator. You're an influencer who got elected. And your constituents, the real people you're supposed to represent, they deserve better than selfies and socialism. Followers, zero major legislation, just tweets. Share if you want real leaders, not influencers. Jake Tapper, recognizing they were in the final minutes, tried to move to closing statements. Let's give each of you a chance for final. Actually, Jake, if you don't mind, Kennedy interrupted politely, I have one more thing. A little quiz for the Congresswoman. She has an economics degree, after all. Let's see what she learned. Kennedy pulled out a notepad. Just simple questions. Basic economics. Shouldn't be hard for someone who went to Boston University and studied economics for 4 years. He smiled at AOC. Ready? Question 1. How is unemployment calculated? AOC began carefully. It's the percentage of people in the workforce who don't have jobs. Correct, Kennedy beamed. So, if someone has 2 jobs, they're counted how many times in the unemployment rate? Once. Exactly, once. So when you said unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs, that was silence. Wrong. That was wrong. Fundamentally, mathematically wrong. Yes or no? Yes. Thank you for your honesty. To question 2. Tax incentives. Are they money the government spends or money the government chooses not to collect? AOC shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated. No, ma'am. It's actually very simple. Which is it? Money not collected. Right. So when you said Amazon's tax breaks were money that could be spent elsewhere, that was a misstatement. A $27 billion misstatement. But we'll call it a learning moment. Question 3. Your Green New Deal costs $93 trillion. How do we pay for it? AOC launched into talking points. Through progressive taxation and restructuring. Specific numbers, please. We tax all billionaires at 100%. We get $5 trillion. That leaves $88 trillion. Where does it come from? She couldn't answer. If we tax everyone making over $100,000 at 100%, take every penny, we still couldn't pay for it. Yes or no? The analysis would need to... Yes or no? Yes. And so your plan costs $93 trillion, and you can't explain how to fund it. Is that accurate? Long pause. The funding mechanisms would need to be developed. Kennedy let that hang in the air. You wrote it. You champion it. You say it's essential to save the planet. But you can't fund it. He turned to the audience. Folks, this woman has, he counted on his fingers, an economics degree she doesn't understand. A working-class story that's fake. A $93 trillion plan with no funding. A luxury lifestyle while preaching socialism. 0 major legislative accomplishments. And 13 million Twitter followers. The audience was riveted. The verdict? Kennedy's voice became more serious. the folksy delivery dropping slightly to reveal the Rhodes Scholar underneath. Now, I'm just a simple man from Louisiana. Went to school, learned some things, practiced law, tried to serve my state with honor. He paused. And I can tell you this with certainty. Economics isn't about feelings or good intentions. It's about math, numbers, reality. He looked at AOC. Socialism isn't about justice or fairness. It's about government control, taking from producers and giving to government to redistribute. It's been tried dozens of times in dozens of countries, and it fails every single time. His voice rose. And leadership, real leadership, isn't about Instagram followers or Twitter trends. It's about knowing what you're doing, understanding policy, delivering results, actually helping people. He gestured at AOC. You, ma'am, are very good at social media. I'll give you that. You can tweet. You can trend. You can go viral. You're an influencer. He paused. But you can't explain basic economics. You can't fund your own proposals. You can't pass legislation. You can't even help your own grandmother when people offer money. Kennedy's final line was delivered with devastating simplicity. You're not qualified to run America's economy. You can barely understand your own economics degree. And respectfully, that's dangerous. The conservative section erupted. Standing ovation. Applause so loud it drowned out everything else. AOC sat frozen, unable to respond. Her social media confidence completely shattered by basic questions she couldn't answer. Kennedy stood, nodded politely to the audience, shook hands with a shell-shocked Jake Tapper, and walked off stage to thunderous applause. The debate was over. And so, effectively, was AOC's credibility as an economic policy expert. The video exploded across every platform simultaneously with a force that surprised even seasoned political observers who'd seen countless viral moments come and go. Within 1 hour, 28 million views. Within 24 hours, 87 million views. Within 48 hours, 156 million views. Within 1 week, 203 million total views. For context, the average State of the Union address draws about 30 million viewers. This debate had nearly 7 times that audience. And the numbers kept climbing. Simple country lawyer became the instant viral phrase. Memes flooded social media. Kennedy with his giant calculator, Kennedy's "I'm just a simple man" expression while destroying AOC with facts, Kennedy's folksy smile while asking questions she couldn't answer. The juxtaposition of his humble demeanor and his intellectual destruction of her positions became iconic. Conservative media went into overdrive. Fox News replayed the full debate 3 times in the first 24 hours. Sean Hannity dedicated an entire episode to The Rhodes Scholar versus the Bartender. Tucker Carlson did a segment on what happens when social media meets actual economics. Laura Ingraham brought on economics professors who used Kennedy's questions as teaching examples of basic concepts AOC had gotten wrong. But more tellingly, mainstream media couldn't defend AOC this time. CNN's own post-debate panel looked uncomfortable. Even sympathetic commentators had to admit that Kennedy had scored significant points and that AOC had struggled with basic economic questions. MSNBC tried to spin it as stylistic differences, but their own viewers weren't buying it. The comments sections were brutal. The New York Times ran a surprisingly honest analysis. When style meets substance, how a Senate veteran exposed the limits of social media politics. The article noted that AOC's inability to answer basic questions about her signature proposal raised legitimate concerns about policy expertise in the Instagram age. Economics textbook publishers contacted Kennedy's office within days, asking permission to quote his explanations of unemployment statistics and tax incentives. His simple breakdown, "Tax breaks aren't money you spend, they're money you don't collect," became a standard teaching example. McGraw-Hill wanted to feature his Amazon explanation in their next edition. Pearson asked to use video clips in their online economics courses. Multiple professors wrote to thank him for making basic concepts so clear that even students who'd struggled with the material could understand after watching him explain it. The bartender economics meme reached critical mass and became shorthand for policy proposals that sound good but don't withstand basic scrutiny. Political cartoonists had a field day. AOC behind a bar trying to mix a drink labeled $93 trillion, while Kennedy asked, "How much does that cost?" Conservative merchandise sellers made fortunes on T-shirts featuring Kennedy's calculator and the phrase, "Do the math." Even centrist Democrats started using bartender economics as a critique of progressive proposals, much to AOC's fury and embarrassment. Universities began using the debate in multiple courses. Economics departments used it to teach basic concepts and what happens when you misunderstand them. Political science classes analyzed it as a case study in preparation versus popularity. Communications departments studied Kennedy's technique, how he used humor and humility to disarm before destroying with facts. Law schools showed it to students learning cross-examination techniques. Business schools used it in negotiations courses to demonstrate how to control a conversation through strategic questioning. How's that economics degree working out? Can you explain unemployment again? $726,000 per household. Simple Country Lawyer taught you math. Calculator emojis. Her social media engagement numbers told a devastating story of declining influence and credibility. Pre-debate. Her tweets about economic policy routinely got hundreds of thousands of likes and tens of thousands of retweets from an adoring base that saw her as a brilliant young voice challenging the establishment. Post-debate. Those same types of tweets were getting ratioed mercilessly. More critical replies than likes. More mockery than support. Her followers started declining for the first time in her political career, dropping by over 400,000 in just 2 weeks. As casual supporters and even some true believers recognized she couldn't defend her positions when challenged by someone who actually understood economics. The replies to her economic tweets became brutal and unavoidable. How's that economics degree working out? Can you explain unemployment again? Third time's the charm. They had $726,000 per household. Still waiting for that funding explanation. Simple Country Lawyer taught you more than Boston University did. Ask your grandma if she got that 104K yet. Calculator emojis by the thousands. Even her supporters couldn't defend her anymore. The debate had been too clear, too public, too undeniable. You could spin a lot of things in politics, but you couldn't spin basic math or the inability to answer simple questions about your own signature proposal. Kennedy, meanwhile, saw his profile elevated to a new level. He'd always been respected in the Senate for his intelligence and wit. But now he became a national figure. Speaking invitations flooded his office from universities, business groups, and civic organizations, all wanting the simple country lawyer who destroyed AOC. His social media following tripled. Young conservatives started wearing "Do the Math" T-shirts with his face on them. Political consultants began advising Republican candidates nationwide. Study the Kennedy debate. Learn his technique. Be humble, be folksy, but know your facts absolutely cold. That's how you win. The political consequences came swiftly. Within 1 week, a moderate Democrat announced a primary challenge in her district. The challenger's announcement video featured clips from the debate. Our district deserves representation that understands economics, not just Instagram. We need solutions, not socialism. We need substance, not selfies. His first 48-hour fundraising, $2.3 million. Democratic leadership, which had tolerated AOC's social media antics while she was popular, began openly distancing themselves. Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the debate, gave a cutting assessment. Members of Congress should understand basic economics before proposing to remake the American economy. Chuck Schumer was even more direct. If you can't explain how to fund a proposal, you shouldn't be proposing it. That's Governing 101. Progressive allies tried to defend her, but their arguments fell flat. Kennedy was condescending, didn't work when he'd been unfailingly polite. He ambushed her, failed because all his questions were about her own positions. It was a setup. Couldn't explain why someone with an economics degree couldn't explain economics. The Green New Deal, already struggling politically, became completely toxic. Moderate Democrats, who'd given it lip service, immediately backed away. After seeing that debate, I have serious questions about the proposal's viability, became the standard response. Polling in AOC's district showed devastating shifts. Approval rating dropped from 54% to 31% in 2 weeks. Understands economics, down from 48%, 19%. Ready for higher office, collapsed from 52% to 23%. Primary challenge head-to-head, trailing by 12 points. Universities rescinded speaking invitations. Economic policy conferences removed her from panels. She'd gone from being treated as a serious policy voice to being seen as a social media personality who'd been exposed. 3 months after the debate, several interesting developments occurred. The economics department at Boston University quietly added Kennedy's debate performance to their Common Economic Misconceptions course materials, using it to teach students what happens when you don't understand basic concepts. AOC's legislative output dropped to nearly zero. Having been publicly humiliated about her lack of accomplishments, she tried to introduce new bills, but Kennedy's criticisms had made her toxic. No senior Democrats would co-sponsor anything associated with her. The simple country lawyer routine became legendary. Political consultants began advising Republican candidates, "Be humble, be folksy, but know your facts cold." The Kennedy model works. Kennedy himself rarely mentioned the debate. When asked at Louisiana events, he'd smile and say, "I just asked some questions. Basic questions. If you're going to propose remaking America's economy, you should be able to answer basic questions. That's all." But privately, his staff reported that his Senate colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, had gained new respect for his preparation and debate skills. When Kennedy asked to question witnesses in committee hearings, people paid attention now. Everyone had seen what happened when he played dumb before destroying someone with facts. 1 year after the debate, in a development that shocked few political observers who'd watched her credibility collapse, AOC announced she would not seek re-election to Congress. The official statement, read in a shaky voice at a sparsely attended press conference, mentioned pursuing other opportunities to advance progressive values outside of elected office and thanked her supporters for their passion and commitment to justice. Political insiders knew the real story behind the carefully worded statement. She'd been destroyed by a Rhodes Scholar playing a country bumpkin, exposed as an influencer masquerading as a policy expert. And she'd never recovered from that public intellectual humiliation. The polls showed her trailing badly in her own primary. Major donors had abandoned her. Party leadership wanted her gone. She was getting out before the ultimate embarrassment of losing her seat to a moderate challenger. the moderate Democrat who'd challenged her, riding a wave of voter frustration with social media politics and empty socialist rhetoric, won the primary with a crushing 67% of the vote. In his victory speech, he thanked voters for choosing substance over social media, results over rhetoric, basic economics over Instagram socialism, and leaders who can actually answer questions about their own proposals. The line got a standing ovation from a district that had finally had enough of being represented by someone who cared more about Twitter trends than actual legislation. Kennedy's debate performance became required viewing in political communication courses. The Kennedy method entered the political lexicon. Disarm with humility, then destroy with facts. Seem simple while being brilliant. Make complex issues understandable, and always know your material better than your opponent. This wasn't just a debate. This was a lesson in what happens when social media popularity meets actual knowledge, when style confronts substance, when an influencer faces someone who actually understands policy. Senator John Kennedy proved something that had been forgotten in the age of viral politics. Intelligence matters. Preparation matters. Understanding basic economics matters. You can't fake expertise when someone who actually knows the material asks simple questions. AOC represented something that had become too common in American politics. Politicians who are great at social media, but terrible at governing. Who can go viral but can't pass legislation. Who preach economics they don't understand. Who build brands instead of solutions. Kennedy exposed that fraud with devastating effectiveness, not through insults or personal attacks, but through basic questions that someone with an economics degree should have been able to answer. How is unemployment calculated? How do tax breaks work? How do we fund $93 trillion? She couldn't answer. And that inability, exposed on live television in front of 200 million viewers, destroyed the illusion of expertise she'd built on Instagram. The contrast was perfect and brutal. A Rhodes Scholar who had spent a week preparing versus a bartender turned congresswoman who thought her Twitter followers made her an expert. A lawyer who understood policy versus an influencer who understood hashtags. A legislator with actual accomplishments versus someone whose primary achievement was going viral. Kennedy showed America that you can defend capitalism. You can explain economics. You can point out socialist hypocrisy. And you can do it all with a smile and a folksy demeanor that makes your opponent look even worse when they can't respond to simple questions. More importantly, he reminded voters what to demand from their representatives. Not Instagram followers, but actual knowledge. Not viral tweets, but past legislation. Not designer outfits at $35,000 to parties, but real work helping constituents. Not social media brands, but substantive governance. The lesson was clear. In the end, reality beats fantasy. Math beats feelings. Preparation beats popularity. And a Rhodes Scholar with a calculator will always defeat a bartender with an economics degree she doesn't understand. If you want leaders who understand math over influencers who understand hashtags, share this story. Comment, "Do the math," if you're tired of bartender economics from luxury apartments. Because Kennedy proved what we all knew. You can't run America's economy on Instagram likes and $93 trillion plans you can't fund. Substance beats style every single time.